Can you say it with me? Got to be true to myself. So what is myself? What is myself? It's a question that if you've never asked that, it's time to ask, isn't it? What is this self I call me? Myself. The more the line thins, the more the boundary just becomes beyond reality, the more that veil thins and thins and thins between that question is what is myself and what is everything, what is anything, what is other, what is spirit, what is the spiritual universe. The more that veil begins to thin, I believe the more we find ourselves. So when we're being true to ourselves, we're being true to the spirit that sources us. We're being true to that greatness that activates all life, that is the activity of life, in and through everything, that is the great cause in which there is no separation. But on this human journey, don't we have separation in mind a lot? When we get a separation in mind, when we get it through our eyes, when we get it through our emotion, our feeling body, all of a sudden, that veil becomes a curtain. And it can be so difficult to see through that curtain. And the world outside of us sometimes tells us to, in fact, even put up curtains, does it not? If you get hurt, put up a curtain. If you feel like you're in a competition or you want to believe in a world of competition, put up a curtain. If you think that there's a right and wrong about what you're supposed to do, what you're here to do, there's a curtain. If you worry, there's a curtain, right? So we're here to use our spiritual practice, to use our spiritual vision, to turn those curtains into veils, to make them so translucent that the Spirit of God, the presence of the great all, shines through them so luminously that our intuition, our guidance system cannot be mistaken. That our choices no longer become choices, but they come into discernment ideas, discernment concepts. That in fact, we feel to some degree that we're no longer living our lives, but we are fully embraced and embodied in being lived. Does that sound like a good plan? Who wants to be lived? Yeah. Now that doesn't mean I take all of me off a shelf and say, do it to me, do it to me, do it to me, do I? No. Because I am not separate from that light, that activity. It is in me, of me, through me, and it is mine to take action on this activity of life. But when the veils turn into curtains, we forget that this abundant life, this abundant source is absolutely surrounding us, that we are in fact immersed in it. We forget. And we begin to think that we have to struggle and we have to strain to get to higher states of thinking, to get to higher experiences. Think about a garden. I have just been so delighted this summer because it's my first summer really with a garden at home. Raise your hand if you have a garden at home. My parents always gardened, and I never actually helped, if you think about that. You know, when you do your reflections later on, I didn't do anything. I ate sometimes. A little bit from the garden. But I never went out there and helped, but I could tell they loved it. I could tell, because it's not like they needed to garden because they didn't have money to go to the grocery store. I knew that wasn't the case, right? So, kind of in my younger mind, it was like, well, why exactly are they doing this then? It's all washed already at the grocery store and it's all bagged up for you. It's ready to go, anything you want. You don't have to worry about bugs. You don't have to worry about, anything getting to it. You don't have to worry about what happened to me, which I put a piece of kale in the oven to make crisped kale, if you've ever done this. And I took it out, and it wasn't alone. So I never really got the gardening thing. I mean, I wanted to do it, and I thought it looked cool, but I never really did it. But I realized after walking out of my back door into this beautiful garden bed, and picking leaves, when I was younger, I didn't like eating salad. And I still would pick anything hot and warm and rich over a salad. But I love getting up in the morning and just reaching down into that garden and just picking a piece of lettuce. I check to see if there's a bug on it, but shake it off, maybe sometimes a little brushing. But I pick a piece of lettuce and I just eat it right there. And then I pick another one and I eat it right there. And another one and I eat it right there. And I had an epiphany the other day when I was enjoying my little morning moment. It's like instead of the cup of coffee now, it's a few leaves of lettuce from the garden. There's no tomatoes yet, but soon. I had an epiphany as I was standing there just marveling each morning, and this particular morning, at how the zucchinis are growing, and it was a flower and now it turned into a zucchini, and every day it gets bigger, and all we do is water it, and it's just like everything's flourishing. And this is like a very expensive organic grocery store that's in my backyard. And if you work, for money, for a living, and all of a sudden an organic grocery store is free in your backyard, that's a pretty miraculous thing. Right? Has anyone gone to Whole Foods and all that jazz? Yeah, Nature's Pantry. So that's a pretty remarkable thing. But beyond all that, what I really got at a whole different level was how absolutely, infinitely, and abundantly supported we are. How amazing the support of life, the activity of life, is in this universe, how freely given it is, how mystical and magical and amazing it is, because all we did was take these little seeds, these seeds that would turn into nothing if we had not put them in soil and watered them. They would just be seeds in a packet forever. All we had to do was take these seeds, do the proper thing with them, put them in soil, and all of a sudden, all of this glory is here. And it reminded me in that moment how free God is, and how freely the activity of God gives. There it is. It just grew, and it's there supporting me. And really, if you think about our real needs, we go into a lot of times our thought needs, our ego needs, our wish list needs, all of this stuff. But if you really look at our real needs, it's pretty miraculous. The world is shelter. Water is freely given and comes from the earth. Food grows naturally in and of its own accord. I don't have to take an engineering class to figure it out, right? And then the spiritual gifts that are implanted and born within each one of us are insanely magnificent once we say yes to living them and bringing them into action. And then we have the ability, through community and through connection, to share these spiritual gifts and to bring light and heaven consciousness to others on our planet and in our world. That's an intelligent system. That's intelligent design. The only thing that keeps us from that idea, from that knowing, from the glory of living in that beauty forever, when you wake up in the morning and you grab a piece of lettuce and you stick it in your mouth and go, "Thank you, Source." So cool. The only thing that keeps us from that is the curtain, because that curtain has become shaded and it has become a veil. And I have a limited belief or a thought that I need to have a lot of money in my pocket to walk into a grocery store and to buy something and to put it all in a basket and come out with it. That I somehow need to have a lot of skills or experience or whatever to solve the things that I might in my life call problems, rather than realizing that I can discuss my desires, my wishes, and look at the community around me and say, where is the intelligence of God when it comes to this field of consciousness? Is it in you? Is it in you? Is it in you? And then say, will you help me? Will you pass down to me from consciousness of generation? And when I talk about generation here, I'm talking consciousness of generation, because we know it doesn't always come with age, does it? It comes in pods of consciousness, fields of consciousness. But can I lean upon, can I borrow, can I share in your consciousness of practice, principle, of abundance in whatever your field of expertise is, so that I might raise my vibration, might raise my consciousness, and that I might demonstrate this intelligence? So the only way we get stuck is when the curtain comes down and we think that for some reason the intelligence that was given to you is just for you. And we forget that you are me and I am you. And that in fact, that intelligence given to you was given to you by the Spirit of life for me, and for you, and for you, and for all of you, and for all of us. When we get that, We recognize that we don't need to own things, we don't need to know things, we don't need to list it out. All the limitations that you might have, list them out. We don't need any of those limitations to recognize that we live in an abundant universe where all of our needs, all of our wants, and in fact more than we could imagine, is fulfilled, is sustained, is given in myriad and wondrous ways. There's a quote by Alan Boone. We are members of a vast cosmic orchestra in which each living instrument is essential to the complementary and harmonious playing of the whole. That is the fabric of this beautiful universe in which we live, move, and have our beings. I want to share with you a couple of readings. One is by Joel Goldsmith from The Infinite Way, and one is by Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now. Joel Goldsmith says this: as you look about the infinity of the forms of flowers, fruits, trees, foliage, the infinity of life in the universe, suddenly you realize the nature of prayer. And you will think, wait a minute, all these things exist without anyone praying for them. These things exist as the activity of God itself, without any human intervention, petition, or affirmation. And I have been praying for these things, for supply, for beauty, for harmony, and here they are. They are God itself. Not something separate and apart from God. They are life itself, and they are already here. Do you believe in and do you trust in the infinite intelligence of this universe? Do you trust that if you choose to learn it, to step into it, to activate it, to say, be active in and through me, that it will bless you, that it will direct your path, that in fact it will not be something separate from your life, it will be your life itself? That little passage that I read had something to do with the garden in the meditation, didn't it? Do you think that we planned that? Did we plan that? Did we know what the other would be doing? Evidence. Evidence that there is one spirit, one presence, one power, and that one does not need to micromanage all of the activities of one's breath, one's life, and one's mind. That in fact, one can lean into the great mind that orchestrates it all in and through each one of us as if we are one body. Amen? And now from The Power of Now with Eckhart Tolle. Watch any plant or animal and let it teach you acceptance of what is. Surrender to the now. Let it teach you being. Let it teach you integrity, which means to be one, to be yourself, to be real. Let it teach you how to live and how to die, and how not to make living and dying into a problem. People that have the gift of expanded consciousness in the field of wisdom got a chuckle out of that one. How not to make living and dying into a problem. Because we do, don't we? We make a lot of life into a problem. And that's cute. It's cute and it's sweet and we're funny. But there's another way to live, isn't there? There's another way to live. And once we can start seeing it as cute and sweet and funny in ourselves and in other people, we start to loosen the burden a little bit and it becomes less like suffering and a little more like an interesting activity, and then a little more like a game, and then a little more like a sweet thing that we do. Like, that's cute, but let's not do it anymore. Yogananda said, do not take life's experiences too seriously. Above all, do not let them hurt you. I'm going to read that part again. Do not take life's experiences too seriously. Above all, do not let them hurt you. For in reality, They are nothing but dream experiences. If circumstances are bad and you have to bear them, do not make them a part of yourself. Play your part in life, but never forget that it is only a role. So what is playing our part in life, that role? What is this remembering? There is a remembering that happens in consciousness in the one body that we are all a part of, bound to. There is a consciousness of evolution. Charles Fillmore called it the law of infinite expansion, that all consciousness expands into higher orders. But I've thought to myself sometimes when I look at generational intelligence and wisdom, the wisdom throughout the ages, that we're in interesting times, because these interesting times are times when we can forget to consciously pass on that intelligence. And of course, that intelligence is always readily available as source, as pure source. And if we have the insight and the ability and the training and the invitation to say direct from source, bring that field of intelligence to me and through me, we can activate it without any generational wisdom. But it certainly helps, does it not, to have the wisdom of generations that we don't always pass down. Have you observed what's happening in our culture and our society here? We're starting to separate and segment people according to their age. As if I would have nothing in common that someone was with someone that was 80. As if I would have nothing in common with someone that was 5. As if it's a good idea. And you know, if it feels like a sorority of your wisdom years to, you know, be included only with people of your own age, you know what I'm saying? And an elderly folks home or whatever you want to call it, right? If it feels like a sorority, like fun, like play, right? Because for my grandmother it does. She's like, this is awesome. Has all these activities, she loves it. But if there is a part that feels separated, like you're in a non-diverse community and you don't get to experience that generational activity, there may feel like there's a lack. Same thing if someone is single parenting. So there they are, single parenting with a certain age range, and everyone around them is just this. There's no generational wisdom. There's no connection through the ages. Is age really that important? Is age really that relevant? I know when I was in ministerial school, I had 2 very close friends, my 2 very closest friends were different ages than me. I was turning 30, one was turning 50, and one was turning 70. And we were our own little posse. We were our own little group of perfect friends. And age had nothing to do with it. And from developing those ageless relationships, we can recognize that there is a lot of wisdom that when we put a veil up between the generations, when we put a veil up between me and other, when we put a veil up between me and different in any way, shape, or form, if there is a veil up between me and an idea that my mind, my emotions, or my eyes see as different, I'm losing out on God. I'm losing out on my birthright, what's consciously given to me. I think about the women's lib movement, and I think how the pioneers in women's lib, right? I mean, the time when women couldn't vote, the time when women couldn't speak, the time when I couldn't do this, right? Think about that time and think about the consciousness that they inherited from the generations before and then the consciousness that they birthed for the generations after. If we don't keep passing on those stories and the depth and the foundation of them, that those movements occurred so that each one of us as human beings on this planet could follow our birthright, could follow our God consciousness, could follow the wisdom and the light and the gifts that were given to us. If we don't get that it's about that, we could end up in a very interesting place, could we not? If we don't pass on woman to woman, the consciousness of evolution, man to man, mother to daughter, father to son, father to daughter, child. If we don't pass that on, we are selling ourselves short. The scriptures talk about the birds and the plants and everything on this earth, but us, not worrying about whether or not they're okay, not worrying about whether or not they have enough intelligence and enough source. There's a poem by Elizabeth Cheney, the poet, from the 1800s. She said the robin to the sparrow, I should really like to know why these anxious human beings rush around and worry so. Said the sparrow to the robin, friend, I think that it must be that they have no heavenly Father, such as cares for you and me. Through the evolution of a plant species, of an animal species, it is intrinsically bound to that which came before it, to all of the beneficent mutations, the developments, and the adjustments to increase, to adapt, and to prosper, to be well. Within the seed, within the animal, is transferred all of the wisdom of the past, all of the wisdom and the knowledge of a generation. It is part of the nature of creation. We only get into trouble, I believe, as humans when we do not activate and utilize what we see in the natural world and recognize that the only step of difference between us and those animals and those seeds is that we have more choice. It's the same truth, but we have to become conscious of it. We have to become conscious of the conversations, conscious of the recreations, conscious that we are, I am, you are, the evolution of woman consciousness on this earth. All of us. That you are the evolution of masculine consciousness on this earth. All of us. That doesn't happen in these seemingly pockets of what's me and what's you. That happens with the consciousness that is shared among us and accessible to each of us. But we have the choice to see separate. And when we see separate, we go through some turmoil. Without that unity consciousness, without generational wisdom, we reinvent the wheel, wasting time. We unintentionally harm self or others. We go through unnecessary struggling and suffering. Without context, there is confusion, lost wisdom, a missing link. I hear interesting stories today about what's going on in some schools, what's going on with generations of women. And I think, and I'm a woman, so, I talk more about that. I'm not as privy to the conversations that are going on among men, but I very much know that they are, and I very much know that there are groups that have created themselves to exist to continue this link of passing on the wisdom as the male evolves. But I've recognized a bit of a need in recognizing that our roots go down to the ground, and they need to go down to the ground. And that ground is the ground of our being. That ground is the consciousness that exists within all of the progression of life and the generational wisdom that each being has as they move through this journey of living, of being a human being on this planet. The women's lib movement was not started so that women could disrespect themselves. It was not started so that women could be taken advantage of and feel good about it. It was not started so that women could be the leaders in heart disease. It was not started so that women could model what some men have modeled in terms of being workaholics. Amen? It was not started so that every family must have 2 full-time workers to prosper. It was not started for all of these reasons. It was started so that there could be a liberation in consciousness. So there could be a liberation in consciousness that within each of us, we have a masculine and a feminine nature. And that when they are brought into balance, rules from the outside world or rules from another education system, a family system, whatever it is, cannot be applied to the God of your being. These movements of consciousness and liberation are so that we each have a choice. We have the ability and the blessing to follow our God voice and not the dictates of another, but we have the ability to claim our birthright. The learning, the triumph of one generation is the soil and the foundation for the next. The learning and the triumphs of one generation is the foundation, the fertilizer, the soil for the next. To create without that soil is simply missing the mark. In Matthew 13, 3-9, it says, "Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. And he was scattering the seed. Some fell along the path, and the birds came up and ate it. Some fell on rocky places where it didn't have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still others fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. She who has ears, let her hear." So how do we go about consciously stepping into this journey, consciously claiming the generational wisdom and activating a new reality? The first step is to acknowledge that we are all one, that even though I am in a separate body, even though we all have our own packages, we breathe the same air, we are one of the same life. And we are each here carrying out the evolution of humanity into God consciousness on earth. That's the first step. And it's a big step, isn't it? Don't get exhausted by it, it's okay. It's just a small charge. We're all here. We are all here. You are that important. We are that important because we are all here carrying out the evolution of humanity, the progress of humanity, awakening to God consciousness on this planet. From Proverbs 31:25, "She is clothed with strength and dignity and laughs without fear of the future." That is the one who is grounded in that principle, one who knows they are connected with the consciousness that came before and the consciousness that comes after. The second is this step. To breathe into this affirmation, I claim all of the ancestral intelligence available to me. Would you like to say that with me? Together, I claim all of the ancestral intelligence available to me. Now it's just ours to keep our eyes open and to see where it comes from, to see what conversations it comes through. From Proverbs, "My son, do not lose sight of these. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, and they will be life for your soul and adornment for your neck. Then you will walk on your way securely, and your foot will not stumble. If you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet." And here's the third step. Tell your stories. Tell your wisdom. Do you know how much time we spend telling stories that are not our stories and our wisdom? Every time we tell one of these stories, one of these stories, one of these stories, well, sometimes those stories go into these stories. But every time we tell an unimportant story, we're using God's voice to create when we could be using the blessing of the story that is given to us to prosper wisdom and to prosper the spirit of truth. Let us think about that as we share our stories, as we allow thoughts to ruminate in our minds, as we share our generational wisdom. What will we share? From Jeremiah 6:16, one of my very favorite passages. "Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is, and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls." Namaste.